We talk about it a lot here on the podcast about this growing deficit or shortage of pastors across the board in all areas of ministry, particularly in the kids' ministry area. And the question becomes, what are we doing about it? What's happening at the training level? How are we building this pipeline of young people going into ministry and pastoral ministry in our churches across the country? What is happening at that level? Well, what I want to do today is I want to sit down with a friend of mine, and we're going to talk about exactly that. We're going to talk about the growing shortage. We're going to talk about what he is doing and the program that he is over, and what is happening with students as they're coming into the program, and how they're coming out, and what it looks like for their training to prepare them for ministry to help with this growing shortage of pastors across the board. And so I'm going to sit down with my friend Kolby Kissinger, director of Oaks College, and we're going to talk about exactly what is happening with young pastors being trained and sent off into ministry. So let's get started. So the big question is this: how do pastors like us, who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. I hope you're doing wonderfully wherever you are and whatever it is that you are doing. As always, what we do here at Ministry Hackers is we're helping you as pastors and ministry leaders, helping you discover that dream life in ministry, helping you find that life of serving and giving your heart to the calling God has put on your life, where you pastor a growing church, pastor a growing ministry, while at the same time enjoying your family and friends, watching your kids grow up, hanging out with your spouse, traveling and enjoying the hobbies that you enjoy in your own personal life. That's the goal, is to have this fulfilling lifestyle in ministry where you're not overwhelmed, you're not anxious, you're not stressed out, you're not considering leaving the ministry, because the Lord knows we need everyone who has said, hey, I am going to answer the call to ministry. We need everyone to answer that call, to stay in it for the long haul, and to create a lifestyle that keeps them moving forward. And so that's our goal here. And I assume that's why you are here at this podcast. And so I'm so glad you're here. Thankful that you are a part. Thankful that you are joining us today. If you want to go deeper, if you want to go to next step, you want to say, you want to go beyond, hey, I want that lifestyle, and you want to see what that lifestyle actually looks like, I want to encourage you to go to brandonpartycooper.com/ I want you to go to brandonpartycooper.com/more time, more money. And right there, you will be able to see a step-by-step process on how you can go from overwhelmed and stressed and anxious to living this life where you have margin in your time, margin in your money, time to spend time with friends and family, time to watch your kids grow up, time to do all the things that you love outside of ministry. Because you and I both know life is more than just our ministries. And if it isn't, if our whole life is just ministry at the church, managing staff, managing our congregation, managing the organization of the church, it's just not the fulfilling life that we signed up to live. And so I want to encourage you, go to brandonpartycooper.com/more time, more money. Right there, you'll find the step-by-step guide. Go straight through that. You can see how you can go from being overwhelmed to having this fulfilled lifestyle where you love ministry, love life, you're not stressed, you're not overwhelmed, and you're enjoying the fulfilling life that God has created for you and He's called you to step into. Once again, go to brandonpartycooper.com/more time, more money. Get your free step-by-step guide right there. Now, as I mentioned, we are sitting down today. I'm sitting down today. I'm having this conversation with my friend Kolby Kissinger. Now, Kolby, he was a student of mine years ago in a program at Oaks College. Our focus was training ministry students who were going into a university setting saying, hey, I want to be a full-time ministry. I want to be a full-time in ministry, be a pastor. They were raising their hands. They were coming to the program, and we were training them up to go out into full-time ministry. Well, now, today, 12 years later, Kolby is the director of Oaks College. And so I sit down with him today, and we talk about training young students for ministry, what that looks like for them, how they approach it, and what he sees long-term for the future of ministry based on the students that he's training today and how they're coming out of the program. And so sit back, Enjoy this conversation that Kolby and I have as we talk about the future of ministry students. Welcome, Kolby, to the Ministry Hackers podcast. So glad that you're here, man. I'm super excited to be with you and to just have this conversation. And so welcome.
Man, yeah, I'm excited, man. Thanks for having me on, Brandon. It's a real pleasure and a joy, man. It's been a while since we connected, and man, just appreciate you and all that you're doing to help further the kingdom, man. It really is a privilege.
Yeah, it's great. And so, just for everybody listening and watching, so Kolby and I have been together for a long time. So, I was
Yeah.
director of the Oaks College years ago, and Kolby was one of our students that came in. He actually was my RA for a little while, and him and I just worked together for a long time. He is an incredible pastor, incredible individual, incredible dad. He just had twin girls a year and a half ago or so, correct?
Yeah, we just had twins, Charlotte and Elizabeth, and they're amazing. It's been the greatest, hardest thing I've ever done, and a real joy and privilege. We are definitely not bored in my house
Right.
anymore. We weren't to start, so now for sure we're not. But it's been a journey, and do life with them for sure.
Nice. That's awesome. So exciting. Well, I'm excited to have you here because we're going to talk about Oaks College. We're going to talk about ministry training. We're going to talk about all of that. But I want to start with talking about you were a part of the Oaks College years ago when I was one of the directors there. So we're talking 2009. So 12 years ago. Now you're the director of the program. And looking back over the last 12 years, how has ministry training changed over the last 12 years from the time you entered as a student to the time now, 12 years later, you're the director? How has ministry training changed that you can tell?
That's a great question. I think it's more refined and a little more dynamic. When we first started doing Oaks College back in 2009, I mean, it was pioneering. I mean, it was a new concept. It was a new way of doing ministry, training leaders for ministry, equipping them with, a quality education with hands-on experience. And so there were just like things that we had never tried or did that we were trying and doing and, just learning as we were going. And I think now it's you kind of know what works and what doesn't work and what's going to be problems and what's not going to be issues anymore. And so I think it's more refined. A lot more people are accustomed to the idea. You don't really have to spend a whole lot of time explaining it,
Mm-hmm.
talking to them about this, concept of a church having a school of ministry. And so I would say that's probably one of the biggest changes, along with the education system in general. The education system has just changed and has gone through a lot of different ins and ebbs and flows, especially with COVID. And so I think that has allowed it to change a lot too.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty much what my thought is on that.
So just give like a brief overview. How is Oaks College different than, say, Bible college? If a student comes to Oaks College, how is that experience different than like going to a Bible college?
Yeah, great. So I think the biggest difference is that they are immediately integrated into full-time vocational ministry in a church setting. So students come in as freshmen. Some transfer in as in a different year, but the majority come in as freshmen. They're taking their classes at a Bible college.
Okay.
We teach a few of those classes here on campus. So, like, I'm a professor of one of those classes, and so the first difference really is that they're able to hear from me on at college level courses about
Right.
how to integrate this into ministry in a relevant way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the other big practical way is that they're immediately a part of an internship where they're taking what they're learning in in college classrooms, and they're actually testing it and applying it to
Okay.
the field
Nice.
of ministry that they feel like God is leading them into. And so I would say that's probably the biggest difference, the on-ramp. Some people can go to Bible college and still be a part of church and do that concept, but the
Right.
on-ramp and the integration of it, we actually create room and space for that. And so it's a little bit easier for students to do that.
So I know when I went to Bible college, there were kind of a couple different ways you could do Bible college. You could do Bible college and just do college and just do classes. And, for me, I played basketball
Yeah.
like, I don't know, 8 hours a day or whatever. But the other option is, you could get involved at a church. Like you could, go to a church and
Mhm,
be a part and, maybe you were a youth leader or whatever else. Or the other option, at least for me in Bible college, the other option was you could be on like a ministry team. So I was on a couple drama teams that travel
mhm,
and those types of things. But it sounds like for you guys, the ministry training is a little more intentional and a little bit more structured than any of
mhm,
those options. So explain kind of how
mhm.
that looks for you guys.
Yeah, so if a student wants to be a youth pastor, we have a youth internship, and that youth internship is specifically designed to equip, challenge, resource that student to know how to be a youth pastor specifically.
Mm,
Puts them in small group settings, puts them on the stage in some capacity. They have to show that they can lead something, lead a zone in the youth ministry at our church specific.
nice.
And so it's just tailored to the ministry. If someone wants to do worship ministry, there's specific things, challenges, things that they have to do and prove that they can do before we put our stamp on it and say, hey, they're good for ministry, or hey, you've completed the program. And
Okay.
so instead of it necessarily being like, hey, just go and get involved in the church. It's like, no, I actually want to be a creative pastor.
Mm,
Okay. Well, here are the things that we have set up for that. And here are the projects, the accomplishments, the challenges that we want to see you walk through, navigate through, and then also provide a safety net for, which I think is pretty key. Other churches may have this, but we want our students to fail. Like we would rather have them fail here than
right.
fail in full-time vocational ministry,
Right.
and it like I would rather have them if they're going to have, like, I don't want to say this, but if they're going to have a moral failure, or if they're going to fail in any capacity, I'd rather them fail here under our covering so that we can
Right.
walk with them to complete and total healing than not that, and then they lose credibility, they lose their influence in ministry. And so we want to provide a specific safe place for students to grow, get healthy, know their identity, and
Yeah.
then be sent out with some experience, some credible experience, that we can actually attest to them for, and say that, yeah, that's a part of that.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Well, and what I love about it is because, again, for me, I made the choice in Bible college to get involved with a pastor in a youth ministry, and I stayed with him. And even to this day, I look back, and my relationship with that youth pastor and my involvement at that church was paramount to my growth in ministry and, kind of the trajectory that I was on. But I also know a lot of
Yeah.
my friends who they just did college, and so the fact that you guys
Mm,
a system set up that's intentional, not only
hmm.
about doing the training and the skill development, all those things of ministry, but also navigating some of those soft skill elements of relating with people and figuring yourself out as a student. Like you said, if there's anywhere to make a mistake or to fall down and
Yeah.
to get back up, it's much better to do it in that environment than when you're in full time
Yeah.
ministry and you have a lead pastor over
Yeah.
you saying, "Hey, we can't we can't do
Yeah.
it." And so
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're on the front end of training students for full time ministry. That's your focus there at Oaks College.
Yeah.
Is what you do as a director. That's your focus. So on my end, and the pastors that watch this and listen to this podcast, they're on the other side. They are pastoring churches, and they're looking to hire youth pastors and kids pastors and executive pastors and worship pastors. But the reality is there's this growing deficit of pastors. We have lots of baby boomer pastors retiring. We have what appears to be a shrinking pipeline of students coming out of Bible college and ministry schools and whatever else into ministry. And so I guess as a director of a program that's developing students, I guess my question would be for you, um, what do you see? Like, do you see this dwindling pipeline? Do you see this growing deficit of students, or are you seeing good quality students who are raising their hands and saying, "I'm called to ministry. I want to do it," and they're going through the program and they're going out in ministry? Are you seeing that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing, I mean, I can't speak for, all things ministry school in the nation. I really can only speak to what I'm kind of observing and seeing. But I think that, Christianity as a whole in our culture is diminishing. So I think you're
Right.
seeing naturally just that take place. But I also would say that, man, COVID has really thrown a curveball to education in general. And I
Mm,
think the education system in general was not on the greatest trajectory in terms of how expensive it's becoming
right.
and what that's looking like. So I think the market's probably going to correct itself and is correcting itself when it comes to ministry training program, Bible colleges, and different things like that. I mean, what we're seeing is we're not really seeing a deficit, partially because our church is emphasizing on growing leaders and developing
Mm,
people. So
yeah.
our youth ministry is growing. It's larger than it ever has been in the history of our church. I do see a deficit in kids volunteers, and so it naturally would follow that there's going to be a deficit in kids
Oh yeah.
pastors, and in that degree. But I can just tell you, we've doubled in size since started this role in January,
Wow.
and so I think students are there. I think students are out there, wanting to be in full-time vocational ministry. I think it's also a part of the pastor's job to pull them and to call them and say, "Hey, this what you're feeling in your heart is not a coincidence, and you can do full-time vocational ministry." And it is a sacrifice in some ways, but if you feel called, this is something that you can step into.
Right.
I also think that, man, our culture and ministry in general is becoming more adaptive to the marketplace
Mm,
and to other settings. And so I think we're sending out ministers still at the same capacity. They're just not necessarily in the church.
mm,
I think the church is building itself. God's building his church. I just think we're
yeah.
seeing a lot of business leaders. We're seeing a lot of medical doctors and lawyers, Christians that are stepping up to the plate and doing that. And so I think naturally you'll start to see some deficit on the church side.
Right.
But I mean, we're seeing great students, man, and we're sending out great students,
Mm,
that I would say, man, jumping into a lead pastor role might be a lot of pressure for them, especially coming right out of college. But I think that they're equipped and confident to lead in ministry full time for sure.
that's awesome. So that was going to be my next question. Looking at the students coming in, how are the students different? Like, again, so looking back 12 years ago when you were coming in to, Oaks College, now 12 years later as the director, you're recruiting kids, you're interviewing kids, you're bringing them on, you're, bringing them into the program. Do the kids look different? Do they look the same as they did 12 years ago? Are they coming in? Obviously, you've mentioned a couple of times with COVID, that's got to impact them to a degree. So with the students coming in now,
Mhm.
and even kind of looking at them 5 years or 10 years from now, how are they different today than maybe when you came in the class and that generation that came in at the same time you did?
Yeah. I think there's just a whole lot more awareness and emphasis on students' emotional and mental state.
Mm,
And students are aware of that. So they're constantly just aware of their emotional and mental state. And that's a good thing and not so much of a good thing. Whereas when I came into the program, like we didn't give a cahoot about our emotional and mental state. We were like, we're dying for Jesus, and that's it.
right.
And I think these students would say the same thing, but I think it's just there's just our culture has just put a whole lot more emphasis around anxiety and
There's a lot more awareness
students' mental health,
of all of it.
and
Hmm.
there's just a lot more awareness around it. But I mean, I think it's mostly just a lot more fear. There's a fearful spirit that we're running into a lot. I would say it's not even anxiety. Anxiety, even that word, anxiety is like the definition is about being nervous about something exciting that you're about to do. I have anxiety because I'm about to speak on a stage or I'm
Right.
riding a roller coaster versus now we're attributing anxiety to like all these negative things.
Right.
And I just think that like it's more about fear. It's just if we're getting to the root cause, there's
Mm.
just a lot more fear. Whereas when we were coming in, we just didn't. There was still fearful stuff, but it wasn't as prevalent, I would say, and we weren't as engaged in what social media is creating and like the fads going around in social media that was just starting, and
Right.
so we haven't grown up in it and it's not so prevalent in our consciousness and psyche. And so I think that's kind of like what we're having to navigate and what we're like working through
Right.
is just that there's just so much fear that students are don't want to do something because they're afraid they're going to mess up their destiny or they're afraid they're going to get hurt and all that kind of stuff, whereas we were pretty much just like, yeah, just we're going to do it, we don't care,
Right.
which that was bad in some cases too, you know.
Well, and that okay, so that brings up a good point. So let's say I'm a pastor out there, and I have a young youth pastor, or young kids pastor, and maybe I'm dealing with some of that. Maybe I'm dealing with, a new pastoral staff member who's navigating, maybe is afraid to step into a new uh, role at the church, or you've asked them to do stuff and they're just not sure, and so I'm not really sure how to navigate that or help them. I just want my kids pastor to do kids ministry. Like I don't want to have to deal with all of that. But the reality is as lead
Yeah.
pastors, that's kind of where we have to go. Like we're hiring younger staff members and they come with different challenges than when we first stepped into
Mm.
ministry. And so I guess what would you say to a pastor who's in that situation, who has a young staff member and having to deal with kind of navigate some of those anxiety issues or those fear issues, and at
Yeah.
the end of the day the pastor's like, I just want them to do the job that they've been hired to do. Like what would you encourage them to do, and maybe what steps could they take to navigate that with that young staff member?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I think the first thing is validating that their feelings are real,
Hmm.
but they may not be true.
Right.
So what they're feeling may be real and it is real,
Hmm.
but it may not be the truth. And the
Right.
truth is what is going to set them free. And
Hmm.
so, but you have to start with just validating what they're going through. And it's real. It's a real thing. It's something that they're walking through. And so just validating it does a whole lot, man. Just validating like what they're going through is a lot.
Hmm.
What they're dealing with is different than what we've dealt with before. What they're dealing with is, an issue that is real and it doesn't need to be ignored. But just allowing the truth of God to then come in around them and encourage them. And I would say, too, a lot of our students are looking for family, like not
Right.
like
Yeah.
surface level relationships. They're actually so hungry for fathers and mothers to go deep with them and
Yeah.
care genuinely, deeply about them on so many different levels. They just haven't had that. There's just so many surface level interactions. Students just don't feel like people really, really, really care and
Right.
love them and have a deep experience with, a deep love for them.
Yeah.
And so, those are kind of the two things off the top of my
That's
head
good.
that I would say, like, if you're working with students that are walking into this, it's just validate what their issue is. But again, it may be real, but it may not be the truth.
That's
And
good.
then, being a father to them and like, what would you do if this was your son or daughter, and
Right.
viewing it like that because they hunger for that. They really do.
Yeah.
They really desire that.
Yeah. And I think that is hits it right on the head, because most of us, when we, especially starting out, when we go into that first ministry position, or really most ministry positions, we're moving. We're moving away from everything that's familiar. We're moving away from family
Mm-hmm.
and friends. Like I know for me, my first ministry position, that was the hardest part for me, is I left everything that was familiar and I
Yeah.
stepped into a position. And to be fair, like I was expected to do a job and I was willing to do it. But at the same time, like I was disconnected. I didn't know anybody. I didn't, and even you know, my lead pastor, as great as he was and as much as I enjoyed working with him, I felt disconnected from him. And so, like,
Mm,
outside of office hours, I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know I don't know anybody. The church, we didn't have a lot of
yeah.
people my age, and so I wasn't connecting with anybody. So I just imagine, like, if I'm a young pastor now and I'm in a small town, in a small church, and everybody is, 20 years older than me, I I really do need a community around me, and I'm looking to my lead
Mm-hmm.
pastor as at least somebody to guide me, and more so,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like love on me, mentor me, and maybe that makes me
Yeah.
needy, maybe, but I think, like you said, that's just the reality that we're at. We have a lot of young
Yeah.
pastors and ministry leaders who are coming from broken homes or non-existent families or whatever the case
Mm-hmm.
is,
Yeah.
and we're expecting them to perform at a high level in a ministry position when their
Mm,
basic need for community is not being met. And so I just love
yeah.
that. I love that
And I
you're.
would, yeah. And then sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
you're
I
good.
would say too, if the pastor's unable to do that, um, get someone in your congregation to do that.
Mm,
It's really just finding somebody that they can bond with. And I would say this too, man. It's like the thing that, your generation, generations older than us, that they can teach this generation is how to work hard.
mm,
But they're not going to understand that and trust that opinion unless they know that you genuinely care for them.
good.
And once they receive that and know that you have their back and that you're fighting for them, they're going to be so loyal to you, probably more loyal than you ever thought that they could imagine, because they want and desire a father or mother to mentor and strengthen them. But also, it's like the way that you work, the way that you pastor work will show them, man, this is like they're giving their everything. They're working at it with their whole heart, their whole being, as if for Christ. It's like some students haven't encountered that and haven't engaged in that work muscle, and so like they can learn from that and you can teach them that. I think that's a big thing, but it first starts with you showing them that you genuinely want them to be a part of your church family, and whether that's you opening your home or having elders or other leaders do that in your congregation.
Yeah,
It makes a big difference.
that's good. Well, and one of the things we talk about here on Ministry Hackers all the time is, even going generations before me, the mentality was like you were on 24/7 and ministry was all the time and you're just go. But I think that as it's played out over the last few decades, we have too many pastors who are struggling with depression, who are leaving the ministry, whatever, because of burnout. And so, we talk about it here a lot about creating margin in your time, spending time with your family, those types of things. And I think what you're saying is, hey, don't just hire somebody and give them a job to do, but love on them, bring them in, show them community, show them a home, and teach them how to do those things. Teach them how to be a father. Teach them how to be a good
Mm-hmm.
spouse. Teach them how to be a good citizen in the community beyond your ministry position. Because I think that those are some of the things that aren't taught well anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
things that even when I think of the guys who I was mentored by, that's
Mm-hmm.
where I picked that up. They taught me how to work hard. They taught me how to,
Mm-hmm.
love on people and how to sacrifice, my time and my energies and my comforts and all those things. And we have a generation that isn't being taught that as well. But like you said,
Mm-hmm.
they're very dynamic. They're very excited. They understand this world a lot better than we do sometimes. And so just finding that balance of teaching them the things they're missing, embracing the things that that they bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
and validating it, like you said, validating what they bring to the table.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, okay, so if I'm a pastor and I have, let's say I have a student in my youth group who says, "Hey, I want to go to Bible college," but I can't afford Bible college. Like it's just beyond my reach. What would you say to that pastor? What could that pastor do to develop somebody in their church, a young man, a young woman wanting to go into ministry? What could they do to develop them into ministry if that student is just saying, look, I can't do Bible college, that's not an option, I can't go to Oaks College? What could that pastor do to encourage them in their pursuit of full-time ministry?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think the more and more pastors and leaders are thinking about how they can create their own kind of development of pastors and leaders within their church, the better off, that congregation students are going to be. The more that you can think about how you can create your own Oaks College, that may not be a reality, but the more that you can think about how can I take the Bible knowledge and education that I have or that is out there on the Bible Project, that there's just tons of resources that you can
Right.
get and grab. Take that and help them to understand and get a good biblical theology, but also while providing them with opportunity, not just to do work, but to lead and experience ministry at a high level, and experience ministry, like bring them into
Good.
your executive staff meetings, bring them into those board meetings and discussions, bring them close, allow them to see the sometimes not so good or perfect conversations that are
Right.
taking place,
The messy part of ministry.
because yeah, because those are actually the places where they're gonna learn the most and be
Right.
most intrigued about to do ministry further.
Mm-hmm.
But also they're going to have questions theologically. And so you can't just
Right.
go, hey, just go do ministry. There has to be the why behind it. There has to be the good beliefs that will determine the good behaviors. And
Right.
so I would say, really, like, don't focus so much on the behaviors of that student. Focus on how can we create good beliefs in them, healthy beliefs for them, about God, about themselves, about other people. And then,
Right.
yeah, how am I channeling that to create opportunities or responsibilities for ministry experience? And I would say, like, man, don't shy away from giving students responsibility, not
Yeah.
just task,
Right.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Don't shy away from that. And I think there's a big difference. Instead
Mm-hmm.
of like, hey, go do this, it's like, hey, I want you to oversee this.
Yes.
This is your
Carry the weight.
responsibility now. Yeah, yeah, and that weight is pressure filled, and some people, younger generation, may not be able to handle it. But if you can support them with other people that are doing like-minded things through
Mm.
your relationships
Yeah.
and allow them to have a network of people around them, then they'll be able to be confident. Because believe it or not, your students or people that you're developing, your staff, they're not always going to be 100% honest with you. They're afraid in some ways
Right.
of telling you the
What,
whole
really?
truth, right? But yeah, I know, right? But if you can help them
Yeah.
develop a support system, if you can say, hey, go connect with this pastor's young adult leader, go connect with this guy, y'all form a solid group and walk through this deal together, man, that it's so pivotal. And so for somebody that's can't afford Bible college or can't do that,
Mm-hmm.
can't do an Oaks College and doesn't want to pay for that, those are kind of the thoughts and concepts that I would have. I don't think there necessarily needs to be, you got to create this learning management system or curriculum that they got to walk through, like a lot of work on the front end. It's really just going, how can I create good theological beliefs, give them responsibility, and provide support for them
Good.
in that way.
Yeah, that's good. Because again, I think part of it is not just getting them to ministry, but it's preparing them for a long-term marathon of ministry. And I think
Yes,
I love what
yes,
you're
that's
saying.
great.
Help them to carry, help them to learn how to carry the weight, because it's the weight that
Yeah.
weighs us down. It's the weight that causes us to leave ministry. It's the weight that pushes us into, that, you know, that frustration and that stress and the depression, all of those things that overwhelm. It's because we can't carry the weight that we've been given. I think, like you said, teaching students early on how to carry the weight, even if it's just a little bit right now, getting used to carrying
Yeah.
that keeps them going for long term. Okay, so then let's flip the coin a little bit. Let's say I'm a pastor, I have a couple kids in my youth ministry, and they're saying, "Hey, I want to go be in full time ministry, and I'm interested in Oaks College." What would you tell them? How do they get connected with you? How do they check you out?
Yeah, man. So I would say they can obviously go to oaks.college. That's our website, and all of our information is there. We also have information at SAGU, and so I would say, man, the biggest thing that I would tell a pastor if a student is checking out Oaks College is that we are kind of a great hybrid of a Bible college, a ministry training school, and a mentorship program. And so our students, man, just have a real privilege. We partner with SAGU, Southwestern Assemblies of God University, and so our students actually get to live on SAGU's campus.
Hmm.
They take SAGU's classes, and some of our pastors and leaders teach some of those classes here at Oaks Church. But after that campus life experience, or while they're having that campus life experience, they actually can intern here at the church for college credit,
Yeah, yeah.
and can take what they're learning in the classroom, apply it to a specific internship. And our pastors and leaders, we've just created a good, healthy system where they are meeting one-on-one 2 to 3 times a month with those students, and walking with them, mentoring them as best as they can. And hopefully the goal is that they walk out of here healthy, knowing their identity.
Amen.
And if we can have students walking out of here knowing who they are in Christ, in a healthy state of mindset and strength, and
Mhm.
they're going to be equipped to do any kind of ministry. And my goal is not for them to stay here, but to send them back to the churches where they've grown up at,
That's
to
awesome.
send them back to the pastors and leaders that have invested in them, and build, what that pastor and leader is already building, and build upon that. And so that's what I would, say, if pastor and leader, if they're interested in there, and they can also check us out, on Instagram and different things like that.
Cool. Well, Colby, I love having this conversation with you. I love just seeing you. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah. Yeah, you too, man. I appreciate you so much. You've invested so much in my life and have helped me become the man that I am today. I wouldn't be here without you, man. So I'm grateful for you, and thankful for all that you've given to me, taught me, helped me, and given me responsibility when I probably didn't deserve it, or could handle it in some ways. So
You
just
did great.
grateful for you, man.
You did great. You made me cry. Well, hey, I mean, you got twin girls now, so you are doing it. You are there. You're a dad. A wonderful wife,
Yeah.
Alex. You guys are doing such a good job, man. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so thankful that you're here. I'm so thankful that you're
Yeah.
training, ministry students, getting them ready. Um, I just think that if there's one thing that we need, it's guys like you who are stepping up and doing that. And so, the
Yeah.
fact that you're at the helm there
Yeah.
at Oak College, it makes my heart happy. So, and I'm glad that you're
Great,
here.
man.
Glad that you came on the
Great.
podcast. We'll have to bring you on. We'll talk about some more stuff, and give you a hard time about your Dallas Cowboys once in a while.
Yeah. Would love it. Would love it, man. We gotta get better at Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, right. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and joining me today.
Yep. Thanks, man.